Welcome to Blast Off with Phonics, and congratulations on joining thousands of other parents, teachers, and tutors that are taking a systematic approach to teaching phonics. Blast, Basic Learning Aptitude Skills Techniques by Earlene Dooley is a great way to improve your child's learning. Once inside, you'll learn why reading skills are key to your child's future, the key elements missing in learning good reading skills, how to improve your child's intellectual development, and what role physical development can play in learning, how to reinforce emotional development, and what role good reading skills can play in social development. And that's just a tiny sample. BLAST was designed to be a user-friendly system in teaching reading the right way, the phonics way. So, and make learning to read a blast with Blast Off with Phonics.
I have dedicated Blast Off to Phonics to my grandchildren, Zach Dooley, Ben Kennedy, and Jackson Kennedy, who so generously enrich my life with love and a renewed challenge to help ensure all children the opportunity to learn to read. As with their parents, they each learned to read with phonics and each have become outstanding students. This is what I want for every child, to have the opportunity to read. What a waste when a child does not know how to read because it isn't necessary. Any child can learn to read and be proficient readers when they know how to pronounce the words with phonics. You'll see that throughout the book. Phonics isn't the only answer, but it's an important part of teaching to read.
Why is phonics so important to reading? Perhaps if you try to read along with the following story, My Typewriter, you'll begin to understand. Even though My Typewriter is an old model, it works quite well except for one of the keys. I've wished many times that it worked perfectly. True, there are 42 keys functioning well enough, but just one key not working makes a difference. Sometimes it seems to me that teaching reading without emphasis on phonics is somewhat like My Typewriter. It takes all the keys to work. You may say, well, phonics is only reading skill and it won't make such a difference. But the student reading for excellence in achievement in language skills needs the active practice, participation of every approach to word pronunciation. The next time that you think phonics practice isn't needed, remember My Typewriter and say to yourself, phonics practice is a key skill which is needed very much.
I'm going to tell you a story. It's a sad story. It's almost unbelievable. It's shameful. But I'll tell you that it's got a good ending. It's a story written by the author of the book, The Teacher Who Couldn't Read. Now, obviously, the almost unbelievable part is that someone could be a teacher and not know how to read. But it's a true story. I met this author at a literary meeting, and he wanted to meet me because I had written the book, Blast Off with Phonics, and I wanted to meet him because I wanted to pick his brain just as he wanted to pick mine. And it was incredible, the story this man had to tell. I'll tell you from the beginning, he's a millionaire now. And he's not a millionaire because he stayed in teaching. He did get out of teaching and get into another profession. But the point of the story is, he is a very intelligent man, very clever. And so there wasn't anything wrong with his intelligence. He also had very involved parents. He came from a rather large family. His father was a teacher and worked a second job to help support the family. And he was very much the son was very much involved in the community and was into sports. Now, he says that he knew very early on that he couldn't do what the other children could do. They were reading and he was not. And he kept trying to figure out why he wasn't reading, and he tried to concentrate and figure out how to read, but he couldn't. So years went on by, and to make the story a little bit shorter, by the time he got into high school, he was far into the years of feeling embarrassed that he didn't know how to read, even afraid to tell anyone he didn't know how to read, because he knew that everyone thought he could, and he knew he should be able to know how. Now, he was a very popular boy. He was a football star. He has personality as big as a mountain, so that helped him to get through. But the very sad part, besides not knowing how to read, is when I asked him, how on earth did you get through without reading? And he said part of it was charm, and another part of it was I had to become a liar and a cheat. And that ate at me all of my life. I had to cheat my way through, and I had to lie many, many times in situations that would have revealed that I didn't know how to read. And I said, but how did you get through college? He said the same thing, that he had to cheat and he had to lie. And he had to steal. He would even steal tests. Now, he says that nobody knew that he didn't know how to read. And, of course, he was very clever, or he couldn't have done what he did, and intelligent. He had developed a very good memory, and he just memorized everything. And he said that was easy for him. If it could be memorized, he could memorize it. But he never could break the code on learning how to read. And so I said, well, in college, how did you get a major? How did you get to become a teacher? And again, he says, I had to cheat and lie. And I taught history. And he said, I can tell you almost anything you want to know about history. I listened to tapes. I was a very good listener in school, and as I said, I could memorize anything. So history was a logical subject for me to teach. And then I would have somebody else grade the papers. I paid them to grade the papers. I paid them to make out the tests. So then, as years went on, he got married. Well, before he was married, he thought the one person I have to tell is my wife-to-be, that I don't know how to read. She's going to have to know this. And I may lose the relationship over this. But he told her, and it didn't make a difference to her, so they were married. They had children. And he used to read books to them at night, except he wasn't reading them. He knew all the stories that were in those books. Until one night, as his daughter got a little older, she brought home a book that he had never seen before. And he said he knew at that moment he was doomed, that his child would know that he did not know how to read. And his wife was in the kitchen doing the dishes. And his wife later told him, she said, when you said you couldn't read, I thought you meant you were a poor reader, but you can't read at all. And he said, no, I can't read anything. Well, as years went on, he really felt guilty trying to teach and not know how to read. And while he was in high school, he helped his dad in construction work. So he decided to go with construction work. And he ended up having his own construction company, and that's how he became a millionaire. And it became harder and harder, even with that job, that he didn't know how to read. He'd have to go to the courthouse and sign papers, and he'd have to say he forgot his glasses, or bring his wife with him to read over it for him, and then tell him whether or not he should sign it. So life became even more complicated. Well, she told him he ought to go to adult education and learn how to read. And of course, his argument was, I couldn't learn it the whole time I was in school. Why would I learn it now? And anyway, the short of it is, she talked him into going to adult education. And while he was there, he learned phonics. And he couldn't believe that you could learn to break the code of reading without having to be a rocket scientist. It wasn't that hard. And so he became a reader. That was the only thing he was lacking. He didn't lack comprehension skills. He could comprehend anything as long as he knew what was on the page. So he still was keeping it a secret. He said it was too embarrassing. It's a life of embarrassment. It's a life of insecurities. It's a life of feeling like a liar and a cheater. And while he was in college, even a thief. So it really, really bothered him. And he still didn't feel like he could come out of the closet with that. But then a teacher at the adult education told him how he could help other non-readers become a reader, that he was secure in his life now. He even had a college degree, and he earned it by listening and developing his memory. And although he had to cheat to get it, so he didn't really earn it, but he knew the knowledge. So anyway, after time went on, he decided to write the book and come out of the closet to read. And his whole point is to let this be a cautionary tale that your own children, his parents, one an educator, did not know that he couldn't read. None of his elementary teachers knew that he couldn't read. He was clever enough to cheat his way through, and charming enough, even with his friends, to get homework done. He had lots of girlfriends who did his homework for him. And so nobody knew it was all because he couldn't read. And so the point is that an educator nor a parent should assume a child knows how to read, and should not assume that they're a confident reader. So the only way to be sure of that is to listen to them read, to see if they know something is phonics. Just like the little article we just read, my typewriter. There was only one key missing, and that's an E. If you look at the visually look at that paragraph, you'll see how many X's there are there. That should be an E. There's lots of them, and it's hard to read this paragraph without those E's. And if you try to read it yourself, you will see that. So we have to be very careful and know that our children, our students, actually do know how to read. So hopefully, Last Off with Phonics is going to make sure your child, your student, knows how to break the code in reading and can read those unknown words. And then they'll develop their fluency, and then they'll develop how to get the comprehension skills. But they cannot do it without learning the phonics. Now, I say cannot. There are few students who break that code, and we don't know how they do it. Most students need phonics along with all the other skills.
What makes Blast Off with Phonics such a great tool when it comes to educating your students? Well, let's start out with the author. Earlene Dooley has a bachelor's degree in science in elementary education and early childhood development. She holds a master's degree in early childhood education. Having taught public schools for over 40 years, Ms. Dooley has conducted workshops, has spoken in local, regional, state, and national levels on topics such as curriculum, parent involvement, teacher attitudes and continuity between home and school, her expertise has proved invaluable to parents, teachers, and students. Miss Dooley is a leader and innovator outside the school as well. She has directed several musical productions that involve children and adults. She has been the recipient of several awards for her contribution to the community. She has the Hometown Hall of Fame Award. She's in the Who's Who for Teachers of America and Who's Who for Professional Women. And aside from her career, she's a mother of 3 grown children and a grandmother. One son's a journalist, another is a professional tennis instructor, and her daughter has a career in finance. Miss Dooley wrote Blast Off with Phonics with this in her heart: watching children as young as kindergarten soar as beginner readers and skyrocket in self-esteem without feeling pressure. Ms. Dooley has put into practice her belief that anyone can learn to read. She challenges parents and educators to keep it simple and fun while helping students learn that reading is serious. She systematically shows us how success can become reality. More importantly, her strategy for teaching phonics is proven technique. Now she's sharing these techniques so that more children will become readers. In order to better understand how dedicated Ms. Dooley is to the education of young people, let's take a look at the foreword in her book written by Christina A. Murray, a longtime colleague and supervising principal. Ms. Murray writes, Ms. Dooley is one of those teachers that comes along once in a lifetime. Ask the parents and children that come in contact with her over the 20-plus years she's been teaching. Ms. Dooley is committed to the philosophy that children are ready to learn at all ages. Therefore, she taps into the resources necessary to motivate and encourage children in a way that facilitates their learning. Ms. Dooley knows that if a student has self-esteem and recognizes the relevancy of the task to be learned, they will succeed in the learning process. The course you're about to read is a book that has been harboring inside of Ms. Dooley for many years. At first, she believed that every teacher had the same background, methodology, and commitment to teaching phonics for reading and oral language development that she possessed. She questioned why some students struggled with the reading process and so many others have learned to read with seemingly little difficulty. The basic knowledge of phonics was not clearly understood or internalized in the students' repertoire of skills. Ms. Dooley encourages students by simply saying the only reason you're having difficulty is that you don't know the rules of phonics that make reading easier. Once you have learned all the rules and have practiced reading, you will be able to read most anything. She goes on, my contact with Ms. Dooley has included both personal and professional experiences. I've observed her interaction with her own children. I've worked with Ms. Dooley as a supervising principal and was able to observe firsthand Ms. Dooley's interactions with students, parents, and colleagues. When one considers the scope of the spoken language a child has acquired by the time he or she enters kindergarten, it's miraculous indeed. However, the spoken language must be tied to the written language before reading becomes a part of the repertoire of complete language acquisition. Ms. Dooley provides a language-based development program in kindergarten that emphasizes both oral and written language. This includes teaching of phonics skills to her students. For example, her students were monitored through the Slauson Intelligence Test, the SIT. 12 students were selected at random for evaluation by the SIT. All 12 students demonstrated such high scores in the SIT that referrals were made for further testing to see if these children were eligible for placement in a gifted program. After the battery of tests were complete, it was discovered that these children had above normal intelligence, however, none were found to be gifted. The point of this example is to emphasize the influence of language skills on verbal and nonverbal intelligence. In this book, Ms. Dooley shares with you the development process that provides the basis of acquisition of phonics skills. These skills and Ms. Dooley's approach to reading provide the foundation for word pronunciation, word attack, reading fluency, and most important, comprehension. So read, study, and enjoy learning to teach with Blast Off with Phonics. And forward, Christina A. Murray.
I'd like to acknowledge the following people and thank them for helping to make this project possible. Sue Elmore, a research assistant, whose attention to detail enabled me to reach the goal I wanted for this book. Debbie Steele, a reading specialist, whose insight and enthusiasm for this project has been priceless. Mona English, a retired teacher and lifelong friend, whose love and constant faith is cherished and appreciated. Christina Murray, not only for the foreword in this book, but for her belief in what this book was all about and how others needed to see it and use it long before I could see it myself. Linda Crandall, Sharon Davis, Sarah Dean, Mitzi Holtzimer, and Jane Usula for their participation. Carrie Kennedy for guiding me through the legal necessities, and to my brothers Dave and Don, my mentors. My students for over the past several decades, whose eagerness to learn and excitement to discover their ability to read made my career a most rewarding one for sure. And then to my children, J.D., Mark, and Suzanne, who kept me going through this project.
The following pages contain reviews found in Miss Dooley's book that was published back in the early 90s as she was teaching and introducing the course to teachers, parents, and tutors as a resource tool or manual on how to teach reading with phonics, the Blast Off with Phonics way, basic learning aptitude skills techniques are what Blast is all about. Now, I'm not going to read all these reviews for you. You can do that for yourself. I am going to share one out loud that touched me close to my heart, and I think it'll really make it obvious to you how important and how actually useful Blast Off with Phonics can be when it comes to teaching your child to read. It goes something like this. The year-end results of our parent-teacher conference were received with great pride and joy. Our daughter Lauren was one of Miss Dooley's best readers in her kindergarten class. We must also nurture her leadership qualities, said Miss Dooley. Wow, what every parent wants to hear. Double wow if your kid has Down syndrome. It has always been assumed that reading and one's ability were a known and irrevocable fact. This child is capable of reading and that child is not. But nothing could be further from the truth. The fact is, there are seemingly miraculous accomplishments we can make possible for our children when we understand the very practical way in which we can learn to read. Miss Dooley's reading techniques are splendid. It's fun, but that is not most important. Lauren's whole life has changed and will be forever. She can read. When a child learns to read, not only does her knowledge grow by leaps and bounds, but also her self-esteem, her speech, her articulation, and her behavior. She becomes more intelligent. Reading this book, you will be charged with the vibrancy one feels prior to a great discovery. My daughter, together with yours, are the best hope for tomorrow, and all kids are our future. Reading is a joyous adventure. Have a blast. Donna Thaman, professional mother. Now take a minute or two to read these other reviews. These reviews are also available in the PDF version of the book if you want to come back and review them later.
I was influenced to write this book after teaching more than 20 years in the classroom and watching students succeed who have experienced a strong background in phonics. Other influence came through having helped students who were not reaching their potential and had not accomplished phonics skills. After these students learned the phonics rules and were given time to practice, not only did their reading improve dramatically, but their self-esteem and confidence in their ability were greatly enhanced. And we already know the deficit it can cause when a student doesn't have good self-esteem and confidence in what they're doing. Now, I will let you read the rest of this introduction on your own because I wanted to add something to it. Research indicates that the product of the research indicates that in regards to our students' learning, we get the product of our expectations. In other words, if we don't expect much, they don't learn as much. If we have high expectations, then they meet that, and I couldn't agree with it more. I have started students on phonics before they began school, not having them look at a paper or look at a word, but just giving them the sounds. You'll hear me talk about that more, that even from birth, start reading to children. And as they get to where they're mimicking your sounds, start making letter sounds. And they'll do the same. When you're talking about a train, you're going, well, they're getting familiar with the CH sound. So there's lots of this, and you'll hear more about this throughout the book. So I start them by the time they're in kindergarten, teaching them to read from this book, teaching them to read and learning how to decode phonics skills. Now, you just can't do it too young. These students will learn it. If you expect them to learn it, they do. And remember, learning is serious, but it's also fun. So the more fun you can make it, and the more you enjoy it and kid around with them while you're teaching them, the more that they're going to enjoy it. They don't learn if it's not something that they're going to like doing or dreading to sit down to do with you. So you've got to make it fun for them. Also, we know that repetition is the mother of all learning. Learning how to do something over and over again needs the practice. If you are learning to bake a cake, or if you're learning to make bread, you've got to do it over and over and over again to perfect it. Ask any coach, and the skills they teach in the athletes is one that they do over and over again until they get proficient with it. A 16-year-old learning to drive, they don't just go out once or twice and learn to drive. They've got to do it over and over. Learning the multiplication tables, you learn it over and over again to perfect it or to master it. Algebra formulas, anything you can think of. Most all learning comes from repetition. Well, phonics is the same way. You've got to have repetition in learning phonics. And that is the problem with a lot of basal readers. They introduce some of the phonics rules or skills, but they don't give them enough practice in it. So that you have to have the practice. They've got to work their little brain through hearing the sounds and using their mouth positions to make the sounds, and then coordinate that with reading the written word or the letters to the sounds. So there's a lot going on in learning to do it. And of course, some children will pick up on it sooner than other children. So you take a child where they are. The goal is for the student to become autonomous or independent in decoding skills. And that's what you'll learn in this book. But you also have to realize that not only starting them as early as possible, but also that it's never too late to learn. I've had lots of parents who want to learn phonics skills and say they were never taught it themselves. They aren't good spellers. Maybe they were taught it and it's just second nature to them now, and they don't remember how to break down the code. Even other adults who wanted to learn the phonics skills. So it's never too late to learn it. And you take a child where they are. I've worked with lots of middle school and high school students. I've worked with college students who are in teachers' college and going to be a teacher someday themselves. So it's never too late to learn them. It's just realizing that you don't know it or have forgotten them, that you need to be refreshed with it and learn these skills over again. But it's never too late. So you're learning phonics not only to decode words, but you can become a good speller if you know phonics. And aside from the obvious reason of becoming a good speller also makes a better writer. And we know that writing is an important subject area in school these days for creative writing. They're going to have to do that all through college and the rest of their lives. And students are not afraid to use a wider range of vocabulary words to make their writing interesting if they're not afraid to spell a word. So if they're unsure about a word, they're going to stay away from it. So we want to, with them learning phonics, they're going to be much better at that. So learning phonics actually nowadays, it's just shameful and unnecessary for any child to go without learning it, because if they learn the basic skills in phonics, they can read most anything. 92% of the English language is phonics based. So to learn to decode this is such an important thing, and it's not rocket science. It's an easy skill to learn and an easy skill to apply. And I know when I'm working with older students, for instance, the middle school or high schoolers, or even the college kids that have never had it before, they're just amazed. This is all there is. It's not hard at all, and such great results from it. So it's just not a hard thing to learn, but it's a necessary thing to learn. And there's no reason for a child to be embarrassed with reading or not being confident in their reading. And you think about, why do you put such emphasis on phonics in the very beginning? Well, you've got to understand that when they get into higher level learning, if they're missing a lot of words in a passage or in a story, or missing too many words, then they're going to miss out on comprehension of that story. And I can't tell you how many times a student has come to me labeled with a comprehension problem, and after assessments I find out they don't know the phonics skills and are missing too many words. It has nothing to do with their intellect or being able to work with those phonics skills. It has to do with not being able to pronounce the words within a passage. So when they get into the higher level learning and comprehension skills, they've got to be able to do other things. They have to do things like identify the author's purpose. They've got to know what cause and effect means in that story. Can they generalize? Can they summarize? Can they distinguish between fact or fiction? Fact or opinion, rather? Do they recognize the theme of the story? Can they tell you the main idea versus the details? Can they draw conclusions? What do they know about inferencing? Those are higher level skills that they need to concentrate on after the basic reading skills. So to give them that foundation in phonics is extremely important, to get that out of the way. And they'll learn to recognize these decoding skills right away without even thinking about it. They'll learn, as you'll see as we go along, the AR sounds R, and they can see car. Or look at the word farther. They're going to immediately realize that Farther has three rules in it: the AR, the TH, and the ER. They don't consciously think about that after a while. They just see it and are able to go with it. Well, if there's an E on the word car, C-A-R-E, it changes to care because it's a vowel, consonant vowel rule, which you'll learn. Then take a word like pharmaceutical. It has 6 rules in it. The PH and the AR, 2 rules. The A sounding like sounding like a U sound. The CE is an S sound. And there's U sounding like ooh, 2 O sounds. And the AL at the end, the A sounding like the U sound. Oh, I've had kindergarten kids that could decode the word pharmaceutical. So when they look at it and take it apart, they can do it. It's just never too young for them to learn how to do that. It's amazing, actually. And after looking at it, spelling is a visual skill as well as auditory. After looking at it, they can spell that. So after a couple of tries, that's a long word for them to be able to spell, but they can do it. Again, it gets back to the product of our expectations. And if we expect it, then we're going to teach it. So even if parents don't have time to do all of this, they can certainly get a tutor. And you can even barter with tutors sometimes. If you can do this for me, I can do that for you. So a tutor is a great, great investment. And you won't be sorry you invested in that. If a tutor doesn't know this, doesn't know phonics, if they're a teacher, they're going to be able to look at this and learn it in no time. And then you've got a tutor that can go along with you to help your child. So I want you to, when you finish doing this with your child or your student, I want you to give yourself a pat on the back, because what a gift it is to give a child the gift of knowing phonics, and they'll have it the rest of their life. So when they get into those more complicated skills I just discussed with you in comprehension skills, then they don't have to worry about can they pronounce the words. They don't have to be embarrassed if they're asked to read aloud in school. So give them that confidence and give them that preparation so they can spend all their time on learning what it is to find the main idea, to find out what inferencing means. They can concentrate on that. So give yourself a pat on the back for doing a great job with these kids.
Let's take a quick look at the premise behind BLAST.
If students are expected to reach their potential reading skills in all subject areas, then word pronunciation should be one of their greatest strengths.
Therefore, a firm foundation in phonics skills is imperative.
If self-esteem and confidence in oneself is essential to excellence in education, then students should be proficient in word pronunciation in any subject area.
Therefore, a mastery in phonics skills is crucial.
If students are to acquire a love of reading for their own pleasure as a means of broadening their knowledge, then skills in word pronunciation should be a student's strength.
Therefore, enriching students' educational experience with a strong phonics program is vital to a well-rounded education.
If the fact remains that in this country we continue to need literacy programs for those who go through our educational system and do not learn to read, then something must be wrong with the system. These students are clever enough, like the author of the book of the teacher who couldn't read. to compensate for their own inadequacies in ways that are undetected by numerous teachers and by parents. Sometimes they compensate in ways that allow them to enter college. These students, through no fault of their own, live with the feeling of horror that ultimately their inadequacies will outlast their compensations. Now, this isn't just true with students to the extreme, like the teacher who couldn't read, but it's also for those students who are poor readers, who don't have the confidence, who don't have the knowledge to be efficient readers.
Therefore, a program with concentrated efforts towards applying phonics skills to support classroom curriculum is no longer an enrichment to the curriculum, but rather a responsibility that educators and parents must assume.
If parents do not provide phonics practice at home because they're unfamiliar with phonics rules or have forgotten them, then an easy-to-use resource book for parents is needed.
Therefore, parents need a resource book to assist their child in word pronunciation in much the same way parents assist their child in learning spelling words or practicing multiplication tables.
If basal readers and other classroom language programs do not provide enough phonics practice, then students and teachers should be equipped with a resource to supplement the curriculum.
Therefore, teachers need a resource book that provides numerous practice words for each phonic rule to help ensure that students internalize the rule. This enables students to apply word pronunciation in reading assignments and encourages students to read more for their own enjoyment.
With this premise in mind, I designed BLAST to be user-friendly by both parents and teachers alike. It is my hope that your experience in reading, learning, and subsequently teaching from BLAST will be as rewarding for you as sharing this approach in teaching phonics is for me.